Thanks for joining us here on GameDaySportsRadio.com and the Game Day YouTube channel. We're going to preview the Triple G Canelo Trilogy. Saturday night, Las Vegas, Nevada, T-Mobile Arena. Canelo comes in 57-2-2. Gennady 42-1-1. Both blemishes are from Canelo, the draw and the loss. Of course, I had Gennady winning the first fight, 116-112. I had him winning an even closer fight in the second, but Sam, both times the judges did not agree with my assessment.
Yeah, a lot of people disagreed with the judges on both of those fights, Mike. The first fight, especially, it was that was a strange scorecard if I've ever seen one. You know, you had the first judge who scored it 115, 113 for Triple G. You have the second judge who scored it 114 all as a draw, and then you have the third judge, Adelaide Bird, who her name will live in infamy in the combat sports world for her 118 110 score for Canelo, only giving Golovkin 2 rounds of the 12, which is just absurd if you go back and watch that fight. I mean, you see that score, and you feel like you watched a completely different fight than that judge right there. And you know that's her most famous robbery, but there's definitely some other ones she's had in both boxing and MMA. It's not just that one fight, but that one for sure was a robbery. And the second fight, where it was a lot closer, but you know, a lot of people scored that as a draw. A lot of people scored it for Golovkin, but there were also a lot who scored it for Canelo. Definitely a much more competitive fight that second go around.
Yeah, I bet on Golovkin in the first fight, and you know, after what I saw in that first fight with the scoring, I was like, I am not touching this fight because I saw Golovkin outbox Canelo.
Hmm.
And now that he's out, they fought twice. He outboxed him in both of them and ends up going home with a draw and a loss.
Yeah,
Now,
that first fight, he walked him down. I mean, he looked dominant, and then you see a 118, 110 scorecard going the other way, and yeah, I wouldn't have touched it with a 10-foot pole.
uh, complete ineptitude.
Yeah.
There's no other way to say it. Now, look, losing the nickel on the wager, that's one thing. We win and lose when we bet. But the thing that upset me the most was you and I had ringside seats for that first fight. Now, we weren't ringside for that first fight because we had ringside seats for the fight that was scheduled for May of
Mhm.
2017. Of course, that gets canceled
Yeah.
because Canelo tested positive.
Yeah, it was that second fight, right? That was canceled. Um, where it was the rematch that got canceled. Where yeah, I mean, man, we were so excited to go see that rematch after, you know, we wanted to see Golovkin go in there and redeem himself and get that win. And then, yeah, and then you hear the tainted meat excuse, which is, you know, there's some goofy performance enhancing excuses in the combat sports world. You got the gas station pills, you've got tainted supplements, whatever. But somehow tainted meat is just one that is never rung true to me. It always seems so goofy, and if I'm being honest, I've held it against Canelo ever since. I've never forgiven him for that.
Yeah. Well, you look at the ticket prices.
Mhm.
They're, you know, they range from 700 to 6,500 per seat for
Yeah.
this one. I'm going to pass on that. I will watch the pay-per-view, which is on
Mhm.
DAZN. Canelo's a 5-1 favorite. I'm not going to bet Golovkin here. I've put my hand in that fire before. I've seen
Mhm.
him outbox him 2 times and again come home with a draw and a loss. But I will look at over 10.5 rounds. If the juice goes down a little bit, I think I will play over 10.5 rounds here.
Yeah, I agree with you not betting Golovkin there. You know, I think he's looked surprisingly good, especially for a 40-year-old. Um, you know, going back and looking at film on him, and you're expecting him to look slower, and he doesn't look like he's lost that much. He looks like he's lost a little bit of power, maybe a little bit of speed. But for a 40-year-old boxer, he looks incredible. But you know, the odds are just stacked against him on this one. He's facing a 32-year-old who is, you know, known to be just a gym rat and an analyst, and he goes over every one of his fights over and over and over again. He always gets better with each time in the ring, and I don't. I mean, I'm pulling for him, but I don't see Golovkin coming out with a win in this one, especially with the weird, shady judging decisions in the past.
Right. Okay. So on October 29th in Phoenix, another desert,
Mhm.
Jake Paul is scheduled to box Anderson Spider Silva. Sam, do you have any interest in this fight? If so, will you come back on and break that fight down with us?
Yeah, so yeah, I love these freak show fights, man. I love it. I love seeing uh, just weird matchups like this. And I don't have a lot to say that's good about the Paul brothers, but one thing I'll say about Jake Paul is that he's a savvy businessman. Man, he knows how to pick his opponents in a way that makes his record look good without putting himself in too much danger. He picks his first like professional fighter to fight as Ben Askren, who was a really good MMA fighter, but his striking game was almost non-existent.
Right.
He was an elite wrestler, and that's how he won all his fights. Then he picks Tyron Woodley, who people know as a knockout artist and as a striker, but he's on his back foot. He's a counterpuncher, and he also uses his defensive wrestling to get those knockouts and TKOs. He's not really a boxer. He's not as good of a striker as you really think. So he's picked these fighters really particularly and really smart. And now he's got a guy in Silva who, Silva was signed up to box Roy Jones Jr. a while back.
Mm-hmm.
And the fight fell through and it didn't end up happening. But Roy Jones Jr. doesn't sign up to fight you or box you if you're just some slouch. Like you have some real boxing skills if he's even considering getting in the ring with you. And Silva was an elite striker in MMA, and he's a very good boxer. Even at his age, he's going to be a real test for Paul. Who Paul's a good athlete. He's a solid boxer. It seems like he's definitely inexperienced, but this one's going to be his biggest test so far. I definitely have some interest in it. I'm really interested to see what a younger guy who's been training for probably 3-4 years now, pretty religiously in boxing, can do against an aging MMA star with elite striking. It's going to be a weird matchup for sure.
Yeah, excellent. Well, we'll have you on. We'll break that down. And viewers, if you like our content, hit subscribe and like. And if you hit subscribe, then you'll be notified of our previews on college football, NFL, all sports, and especially the upcoming, as Sam calls it, the freak show or the freak fight between Jake Paul and Silva. Thanks again for joining us here on GameDaySportsRadio.com.